Alrighty, so I'm in our own field of winter wheat. I'm actually just back from Romania, and there's no big complaints there about crops. And if anything, the issue was logistics and too much grain at the ports. So I want to talk about this crop here. So I stood in this field, did a video a couple of months ago, and I think it was April sort of time, and described how good the crops looked. And when you looked across a lot of European crops, they were probably 80 or 90% good or excellent if you were to rate them at that point. So that had my expectations pretty close to last year's really good crop for Europe. So what's happened since then? Since then, I shouldn't be standing in this field now with half the field cut. This field should be still 2 or 3 weeks away from being harvested. So for us to harvest in the middle to end of July is early for winter wheat. So when I take a look at these seeds and I just pull a few of these heads and I take a look at the seeds, I see pretty good grains, but they're not, you just know they're not going to yield great. So there's plenty of them. There's just that last little bit of grain fill is missing. So that takes the potential down. So we went from this above average expectation down to something closer to average. And so that's one of the disappointing parts of this season. Now, what's also disappointing is this overemphasis, in my opinion, towards the 5% of the growing cycle that was really bad versus the 95% of the growing cycle that was really good. And I also don't like this overemphasis on the bad areas and the poor recognition of the record yields that are going to be punched in Bulgaria and Romania. And that's for both the summer crops and the winter crops. So I don't know why they're being ignored, but they are. So there's an emphasis on this scenario where, the emphasis on the last 5% of the growing cycle and the damage that it has done. So I don't want to say it's not damage. It's true that it is, but there's a lack of balance there. Now, when it comes to the value of this grain we have here, it's appreciating in value. Now, if you take this wheat, it was probably, to us, we would have been paid 200 euros a ton a couple of weeks ago, prior to this whole conflict. Maybe we'll get 210 today. So it's up 10 euros. If we're really lucky, 215, but I don't think that's where it's going to be valued. So it's up 10 or 15 euros from the lows of where they were a few months ago. Now, the futures, as we know, are up 30, 40 euros a ton in that time. So there's this big mismatch between what the futures are doing and the physical. So we need to understand that. And it is all rooted into what's happening in the Black Sea. I really don't think that we have a production issue in Europe. What we got is a logistic issue in Europe. Getting it from fields like this to a feed mill, to a flour mill, to export. That's what we've got. It's a logistics issue. And we've got a particularly deep logistics issue in the Black Sea region, Ukraine and Russia, because they keep flinging rockets at each other. And they keep targeting specifically vessels and vessel loading infrastructure at the ports. Now, on Friday, after this big rally, we got this correction. It was a pretty aggressive correction in the price. Now, what was interesting to that is not that its origin was somebody suggesting that this craziness end. That shouldn't be surprising. What was or is surprising is who suggested it. It came from the Ukrainian side, one of the parties that's involved in striking vessel and infrastructure in the Black Sea. What's important to me is where it didn't come from. It didn't come from Egypt. It didn't come from Turkey. It didn't come from Jordan. It didn't come from Saudi Arabia or any of those major destination markets. It came from one of the origins. Now, one of the things we've been really vocal about, and again, I'm really confused why there is some more emphasis on this, but when you stack the Middle East and North African countries all on top of each other, and you stack their barley production and their wheat production on top of each other, you end up with over 90 million tons of grain. First time ever they produced so much. It's 35 million tons more than last year. Now, to put that in context, we're talking about bringing the French wheat crop down from 33 million tons for soft wheat last year down to 31. So we got this 2 million ton drop in the French crop that seems to be the end of the world. And we got this 35 million ton jump in production amongst all the buyers that doesn't seem to be worthy of even a paragraph in any sort of analysis. So that really troubles me at the moment. Now, that said, you can understand why the market, we've done a lot of analysis, and we're going to have to shift a lot of demand July, August, September already to other origins, primarily Europe, then on to other origins after that. So there is going to have to be that demand move, and there's going to have to be a price reaction to it. But I'm troubled by this kind of, the other thing we need to factor in is that there's a big wall, logistical wall. It's a virtual wall. We can't see it, but it exists, and it stops the flow of grains, wheat, barley, corn, rapeseed, sunseeds from moving out of Russia and Ukraine. And as it does that, everything this side of the wall finds more demand and becomes tighter. Everything the other side of the wall gets heavier. And you see prices already going down in Russia and Ukraine. So the grain is piling up behind that wall. So when we find some sort of resolution, short, medium, or long term, who knows? I don't know. And anybody that tells you that they know, they're lying to you because they can't know. But what we do know for sure is that there is this big wall of grain behind waiting for us. And when that wall is allowed to open up, it'll come to market, and we're going to see exactly what we saw in 23 and 24, where we saw this big push up in price and then a big pullback. So we're going to have to be very careful. So I think, what's going to happen this week? Russia's going to reject whatever Ukraine said. That's a default. Probably, I don't know, but presumably they're going to keep targeting infrastructure. That's going to keep supporting prices. Now, one side note, looks like the US are going to taper back their attacks on Iran. So that's going to help probably pull back crude oil prices, which is a little bit of an anchor maybe on the early trade on Sunday and Monday, versus the risk of escalation or continuation of the escalation in Russia and Ukraine. And that helps support grain prices and closes that gap between oilseeds and grains, which we've seen get very big in Europe. That's a topic for a different conversation. So so probably grains stay supported, things like oilseeds get a pullback. And then there's going to be volatility within that. If things look like they taper back, then prices come down. They escalate, prices will go up. But the longer they escalate and this virtual wall holds the grain back, the more the price goes up short term, but more aggressively you can expect it to come down longer term. So managing your risk is going to be super complicated and super unpredictable. My experience using options is born for this situation. So we've been doing a lot of training with our clients to encourage them to understand how options work, how they fit into a scenario like this, and and it's not just like some sort of bias. I'm not a broker. I don't care if I don't make money if people trade futures and options anymore. I used to, but not anymore. I really just want them to somehow trade more safely. And I don't see how that's possible in today's environment without these tools. So anyway, there are a few thoughts for the week ahead. We'll see how things play out. And best of luck for the week ahead. Thank you.